Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session of Trend Detection Live. Good to see a few of you here, and hello to the podcast listeners post-recording as well. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Nat Ford. Unfortunately, the first thing I have to say, he is a salesperson, but don't hold that against him. He's actually got lots of he's been involved in lots of predictive maintenance deployments involving Senseye, lots of industry experience, and has some really interesting thoughts. I mean, hence the title of today's session, which it was really exciting talking about Nat before that. But before we sort of get start digging into that, I'd just like Nat to introduce himself briefly and a bit of background on himself. So over to Nat.
Thanks, Niall. Hello, everybody, everybody live and everybody who downloads and listens. I'm Nathaniel Ford. I am the sales director at Senseye. I've been with the company for about 4 years. Niall raises a good point when he mentions that I'm a salesperson. And the title is quite a contentious title, which is The Truth About Predictive Maintenance. What qualifies me as a salesperson to be evangelizing about the truth? Well, I'm probably, me and people like me who are sales, are probably more involved in the full life cycle and full cadence of a predictive maintenance project than anybody else. If you think about the fact that actually often projects at the large organizations start because we proactively go out and start drumming up interest, evangelizing, meeting and speaking to individuals. There, of course, will have been some energy around things anyway, but we will be on the ground day zero, made up a new number there. And right through the engagement, right through to scaling of a project. So we have a kind of unique position of seeing projects from start to scale and understanding the danger points and the bits that don't work and things that fail and best practice and things that do work. And they're the things that me and colleagues like me discuss and try and learn from and try and share with clients when we engage. And so we understand a bit about the truth of predictive maintenance. Also, because, and we're going to discuss this today, there are lots of different views on what predictive maintenance is, should be, can be, is going to be. And we benefit from some of those perceptions and suffer the indignity of many of them. Again, we'll discuss those points. From this session, before Niall gets going and starts asking me questions and getting into a dialogue, I want to just tell you the things that I want to make sure we cover, that we get out of the session. And if you have any questions about these, then please ask them. This is me laying out my stall. So if you are an organisation, an individual in an organisation looking at a predictive maintenance project, or you're in one and it's going okay, but you want to think about some of the aspects that should be considered, these are the things I believe fundamentally. When you start a project, you have to start out by working out exactly what it is you want to achieve. Don't expect vendors to come and do things that you hadn't thought of. That may happen, but you have to have a really good understanding of the simple business plans, the simple things you want to set out to achieve, so you can check right from the offset if they're viable. Have a scope, work with a vendor or do it alone, but build a scope. You have to establish for yourself, and all of your colleagues are going to work on a project, exactly what predictive maintenance is. I know that's the first thing that Niall's going to ask me, what is predictive maintenance? But we could probably talk with everybody on this call and come up with a number of different variations. So you need to establish that, forget the rest of the universe, what is it for your business? What do you all believe it is? So you can relatively well measure it. Otherwise what happens is 8 months into a project, somebody comes in and asks you a question about, have you achieved X? And you think, well, why would we have done that? That's not part of predictive maintenance. So that's important. Make no assumptions. You need to find a way of measuring the results, short-term and long-term. Those things are necessarily different. You need to be able to measure results of a project in the short term with metrics which are tangible, demonstrable, but then you need to understand what the long-term success of a project looks like. And those two things are very different. We'll touch on that. The way people talk about predictive maintenance and the things it should do, I often start off with talking about this obsession with successfully predicting a failure and successfully predicting its mode. Personally, I think that's bonkers, and we'll discuss. What you really want is a process that changes your maintenance approach, not in a crazy way, but changes it subtly, and then over time, that makes you more successful as a maintenance team, as a business. To that end, build a project team with lots of stakeholders, so you've got all the right people, so you don't have to go and sell it when you're 6 months down the line. And here's the really important bit. Do not, repeat, not do a proof of concept. Don't do a proof of concept. Proof of concept, let's leave that for discussion because that's contentious. Run a project, run a full installation. Buy a product, buy a solution, buy a project team, buy some services, and run a project and get some benefits. Do not base it on historical data. We can learn lots of stuff from historical data that can add to the product, but don't base a project on historical data. Run a full deployment on live over a period of time that's going to be used. That's my laying out my stake. Those are the projects that work. The projects that are well defined, that have good involvement, that are a real deployment. We can discuss all of that and we can pick it apart and we can look at why that works. It coincidentally tallies with my KPIs as a sales guy to sell full fat projects to people. And so we could depick a bit of that. So Niall, sorry, I went on probably a bit longer than I should for an introduction, but I'm pretty passionate about those points.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I'm pleased I invited someone on with such an opinion. It's very rare that usually I do too much talking, so I think we've got the balance right there, I think, as well. But so I've just added a comment into the chat. So what Nat said, lots of great talking points we're going to sort of go into. But if you've got any comments or questions at any point, I can relay back to Nat. Just put them in the chat. There's a chat functionality there, so I just thought I'd let you know. So yes, as Nat sort of gave away during his opening monologue, how would you define predictive maintenance? And I know we've had we've discussed this many times in our conversations. So let's let everyone else find out what your thoughts on that are.
Well, it's an interesting question, specifically because you shouldn't have to ask it. So the question, how would you, as in I, define predictive maintenance, suggests that there's a lot of subjectivity around it, and one would hope that in an increasingly mature market there would be a definition. What I find on a day-to-day basis is that there are multiple understandings of what predictive maintenance is and should be. To understand the difference between those things and to come to an understanding, and my suggestion is that a business works out for itself exactly what it should be. That should be guided by conversations with people like us. You need to think about the tool and the outcome. So there are predictive maintenance tools available in the market and approaches you can use, but there's also the idea of a predictive maintenance practice and what you do with that. So if I was in an elevator and I had to do an elevator pitch, what is predictive maintenance? I suspect the way I would describe it is that it's the ability to raise very early warning or cases that alert a maintenance team, most likely, to early signs of change a long time before there's been a particularly bad failure or something of a negative nature. And doing it in a reliable way and communicating it in a way that can be understood that allows the maintenance team to affect change. That's the starting point of what is predictive maintenance. So a predictive maintenance tool should have the ability somehow to be looking at data and evaluating that data and asserting some assumptions about what may happen in the future and alerting people to it. But what is predictive maintenance in terms of the actual practice of predictive maintenance? It's about what you do with that data and how you use it to form the basis of a decision support process, how you incorporate it into stand-ups, how you take that information, act on it, and reduce the overall impact of negative events in your environment over time. And then what happens next? So we have a kind of flip point. First year with clients would be very much about them getting to trust that when they see a case, it does indeed correlate with something that was going to happen later on. Often that happens by mistake because they ignore a case and eventually there's a negative event and we can say this shouldn't have happened, but it did. And here is the causal relationship between these two things. And they begin to understand that if they react to those cases, these things don't happen. But that's year one. What you really want to happen is that an organisation, from management through maintenance teams, etc., trust and understand that a system like Senseye is providing that function, is providing it reliably, and that therefore, on assets and machines where you don't have cases, you can assume that actually you don't need to go and interfere. And so our hope for an organisation is that they take that basic functionality and they take that trust in it, and it enables them to change or turn down their preventative interventions and be much more accurate about preventative activities. There's a question later on, so I know you're going to ask me about cultural change, etc. So I won't jump into it now. But the picture I'm painting is not one of a wholesale change from a type of maintenance approach to another. So in summary, I think predictive maintenance is a set of tools that create information, and that information is acted on, and those actions avoid potential negative events. And there's lots of different permutations of that, but that's effectively how predictive maintenance should work. And the way that impacts an organisation is very much up to how you implement it, the speed at which you implement it, the speed at which the people start to uptake and trust, etc. But it's not, in my mind, it is not about obsessively looking at failures and obsessing about correct identification of failure. It's about early signs, reacting to those early signs, and flattening down your kind of curves and peaks of negative events in an environment. Sorry, no.
No, that's okay. No, very good. What I wanted to pick out of that as well, it's interesting, that process. So it's easy to, it's all shiny new technology, let's get that, or that's cool technology, let's bring it in. But I'm sure you'd agree, or when you speak to prospects, customers, are they aware that it's better to sort of maybe think about the business outcome first before they look at the technology to fix or overcome that business problem they're experiencing? Or are people still in that mindset of, this really cool technology, how do we, yours looks good, how do we get started with it, without thinking of that problem first, let's say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that because I would say that predictive maintenance is no longer new, and it really, a lot of people you meet will say that it's very old. It's just another way of talking about condition monitoring. But in terms of a big market push and digital factories, etc., the idea of condition monitoring, of predictive maintenance, is relatively new. And therefore, there's been people who've been tasked with understanding the impact it can have, and that they typically might come from a digital part of the business, or they might be a specific person within a plant who has some responsibility. But they won't know the things that we understand. So they might invite vendors in, and they might run a project hoping that 2-3 months in, some things will be shown to them, and they go, okay, that's great. So these are the benefits of predictive maintenance. But in my experience, that doesn't happen. It doesn't work. Organisations understand their challenges. They understand what could happen to make them be better at doing the things that they do. There are no secrets, or at least there shouldn't be. And there's no magic wand that an organisation like Senseye can come in and create something that somehow has a paradigm change they couldn't have thought of. It's actually quite boring. There will be certain machines that have high failure rates. There'll be others that are critical, that don't fail very often, but you want to catch when they do. And you should actually be able to build a business plan around that says, if we invest some time and energy and money and a bit of change into a process, and if we can get rid of these types of events or reduce them, then the impact will be ... We run workshops on that exact process to help businesses to evaluate and determine the value of this kind of solution. But yeah, fundamental projects don't start off with an idea of what that plan is, without a simple set of things they want to achieve, don't know how to measure the outcome, and then look to the vendor to demonstrate and suggest. And it's not the vendor's job to do that. It's not a vendor. They're not Senseye's position to. I mean, in often cases we might be able to, but that should be owned by the client.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And my other question is, what does the use of the terms AI and machine learning, does that muddy the waters as well, even further? Because I thought you were just saying then about you bring in a tool, it's not just magic and just suddenly everything's great. There's obviously these time, resources, culture, which we'll come on to, but maybe you could add a comment about that as well.
Yeah, I in my last position before I came to work for Senseye, I was head of sales at an information security membership organisation. And I went to a lot of events and hosted a lot of events. And I used to host, I was telling you earlier, I used to host webinar channel that talked to information security vendors. And there was an awful lot of content 5, 6, 7 years ago about IoT and about AI. And you'd see the same slides again and again talking about the risks. So this is very much focused on risks, but the risks associated with those two areas. But one thing that struck me when I used to listen to those is they didn't address business needs. They were just addressing the topic of AI or the topic of IoT. And one of the things that I really liked when I first came across Senseye was that there was not an obsession of talking about machine learning or AI. We don't talk about digital twins because they don't form part of what we do, but those kind of go-to topics that people like when they're talking about factories of the future. I gave a presentation a couple of years ago, the factory of the future, and why are we worrying about factories of the future? Let's worry about now. I'm getting to the point of answering your question, Lyle. I don't think that at any point when you are considering predictive maintenance, you need to talk about AI or machine learning or any of these aspects, unless you're from a digital team and it forms part of your brief that you are trying to take from these new technologies and help enhance your organization. But fundamentally, the things that we are trying to fix and do don't require us to discuss it any more than if you went to buy, if you go and buy a mobile phone, you don't ask them to open it up and show you how it works on the inside. You just trust that it does work. You don't. The fact that it is AI and the fact that it has an element which is machine learning should not be relevant. When we present, we do talk about that a bit in terms of explaining how the process works, because that dictates a little bit about the way that we implement our solution. But it doesn't have to be more than slides. And apologies to anybody if you're on this session, you're a data scientist, but for the process of what we do, it doesn't require data science input unless we are working with an organization who wants to also create some of their own algorithms, etc., and have them, look, I said the word algorithms, and have them involved in the process. But that's few and far between. It's a tried and tested technology. No need to see underneath the bonnet. And the other point I would make about that, Niall, is that these projects, because they have a business impact and because they have an impact on OT and IT and everybody else in the business, they require decision making at a number of levels. But the client, the customer, 9 times out of 10 is maintenance. Maintenance are busy, they've got a job to do, they're probably still, a portion of their work will be firefighting. They have systems they already want to log into. The last thing they need is someone bringing them into a room for training on the new AI platform. It's intimidating and probably a bit condescending. Actually, they're the domain experts in many cases. And so, with this, I think we probably can talk also about the way that we integrate and cultural change and all those good things. But I don't think that talking about AI helps anybody at any point in the cycle of managing how to implement, unless of course you're tapping into budgets that require, for some reason, for some part of the organization, the way that it's growing would benefit from talking about those issues. I think, I don't know if that's where you wanted me to go with that, but I think I'm quite clear on that point.
No,
doesn't need to be raised. No,
absolutely. And again, a point I'd like to pull out of there is what you were saying about someone coming in and saying to the maintenance team, i.e. the people who are going to ultimately benefit from the system, here's a system, go and learn it or whatever without their input. So from your experience, do you see that quite a lot where, I'm not blaming IT, it could be any department coming in and saying, use this system, this is your system, or are you seeing much more sort of collaboration between departments when they come to looking for a predictive maintenance platform? Start doing research.
Yeah, I mean, it is very much the case that you'll have organisations who will fund sometimes the first, second year from a different pot than it's ultimately going to be paid from, because it's part of a company exercise in digitalisation, etc. And the danger in those situations always, and I refer back to my point at the beginning about building the team and making sure that everybody is involved, they will often, for very good reasons, end up paying for building a solution that's then foisted on the team who didn't ask for it. And of course, there needs to be some subtlety around that. But solutions like these. Okay, just let's take this moment to make the point that a solution like technology, so a solution like Senseye is a piece of technology, it's deployment. Looking at that is irrelevant, doesn't help you. And then cases are raised, information arises. That's just information. And then that information has to be acted on. So you've got technology, information, action, and the outcome of that is hopefully something beneficial to the process. And that outcome is the thing that you want to measure in a project. In order to do that, you need to have the product being used. So building a solution and not involving the maintenance team who are going to act on that information is like cooking meals and not serving them to anybody. You don't have any real test of the outcome of it. There's nothing to see that can be validated. You don't learn about the solution in your environment. Projects where everything is held away and done in isolation by a kind of committee of people who are not the people who are going to use it in the end can go very badly wrong if you don't then take it and implement it and then give it to those people in the right manner. You need to keep them informed, you need their involvement, you need their input. It is their solution. The projects that work really well start off with considering the life cycle of that piece of information. Where should that information appear? Now, most likely you're going to have clients who have some cadence of stand-ups, they've got some decision-making process. So imagine that, Niall, you and I and the people on this call are a maintenance team, and we manage our process by having meetings every Monday morning where different stakeholders will come. We'll talk about what we're doing for the week, some of the stuff that we know is already planned, and we have other sources of information. Realistically, that would be the best place for a tool like Senseye to have its information pop up. So tool, information, then they can be discussed in that context, which is a context that they're all used to, and a decision can be made, and that decision will be some form of maintenance. It might be just going and checking, but it'll be an action that won't be out of line with all the other actions that are taken. So it's been very unchallenging. And you can go a step further than that and take that information and make it appear in the very place that people go to look for this kind of information, then even better, because then you're not asking for some wholesale cultural change. You're actually saying, can we just slip this extra sort of augment your decision-making process with this extra piece of information? And we do that with organizations where we'll integrate with tools like Microsoft tools like Teams, for example, if that's the place where people will be sitting and discussing assets and issues and recording information and requesting tasks. So that process has to be managed really carefully. Do it in isolation, you have a real risk. Do it sympathetically with the maintenance people and processes in mind, you have a much better chance of that information being acted on and getting your product of change.
Yeah, and that's again was what Gartner called. They use that word. I don't know if it's used anywhere else but Gartner, but they use that word composability for in terms of software that works together. It forms part of a wider, let's call it, ecosystem, and doesn't mean that someone has to use a brand new tool necessarily. It could just obviously augment some of the, and so they can collaborate, I guess, in the places that that they want to. So we've actually got a question in from Thomas. So thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
No.
But just make a note of something I wanted to say.
No, that's okay. Yeah, we've got a question from Thomas. So thank you for the question. So I'll just read it out. So it's why does the proof of concept based on historical data not recommended? Is it connected with data labeling in terms of recording of failures on the system? So two questions, I guess.
Okay. Why should you not do a proof of concept on historical data? Let's talk a bit about, first of all, what can be found in historical data. Historical data is a fantastic source of the information that a system like ours needs to learn about failure modes and patterns that precurse those failures. So absolutely, if you have a year, 2 years, 5 years of data, and you know where failures exist in that, then that's a very good way for us to teach ahead of time our system about those specific failures. But you can't base a project on that for a number of reasons, and I'll try and explain a couple of them. One of them is about the teaching, the best way of teaching our application. I don't want to talk about our system for too much today, but just to give you context, the Senseye PDM solution builds an individual fingerprint of what is normal for every single asset we ever on board. So for all of the hundreds of thousands of machines out there that are streaming information to Senseye, we have an individual fingerprint for each of them. And that fingerprint is updated live, and it's on that basis that we can raise unique cases about an asset. Having really good insights from historical data about failures of the past allows us to then raise cases that specifically refer to that kind of failure mode, which is really good. But that is not the whole of what we do. If you think about machines that fail, they will have known failure modes, but there will be all manner of things that happen to them. And I heard a great expression from one of my colleagues recently, which is that things that have never happened before happen all the time. Now, I'm not going to suggest I've done a study into the split, but most things follow some kind of Pareto logic. So let's assume that 80% of things, for example, for argument, the early signs of are unique and haven't happened before. You don't want to only catch the 20% of things that you've pre-trained your platform for. You want a system which is constantly listening as your eyes and ears 24/7, listening for change, listening for things it recognizes and things which are new, and intelligently allocating a score to them that allows you to either have your attention drawn or not. So that's my first point. If you have a study that's just on historical data, all you do is prove that our technology can recognize and learn. But we know that it can do that, and you go and speak to one of our clients. What it doesn't do is show you as a client a live situation where it's raising cases that you go and inspect and go, okay, no, we can see why there is some damage to this bearing, which we wouldn't have found out in any other way, and we couldn't have pre-taught it because that specific thing had never happened before, because things that never happened before happen all the time. So it is much more healthy. Historical data is fantastic for teaching a solution like Senseye, but not good for running a proof of concept on. I've used crash analogies, like it's like reading someone's diary to try and experience what it's like being a human being. Of course, it's not entirely like that. But historical data has its place, but it doesn't allow you to get the full use of the full measure of the solution. And importantly, let's not forget those four things. There's a solution, technology. There's cases, there's actions, and there's outcomes. And if you base it on historical data, all you get is the technology and some slightly anemic cases. You don't get the full gambit. And the product that you're already trying to evaluate, test, and understand is the outcome. It's the outcome over time. And you just simply can't do that with historical data. I've had this conversation a lot of times with clients, and I think a lot of people would like to be able to say, we don't want to spend money with a company unless they can show us that their technology works. And predictive maintenance is at a stage where people still need to do that. But that really falls into the category of we'll stand here and watch. There's a proof of concept. And those processes just don't work because this technology is all about seeing, using, feeling, acting on, discussing, not proving that our technology works. I know I didn't address the second part of your question. What was the second part? No.
So the second part, is it connected with data labeling in terms of recording of failures on the system?
No. I mean, they're all things we could do. I mean, we can. When we get historical data, one of the team will go and look through it and decide which bits are going to be most useful, and they'll work in collaboration with the client. What's really frustrating is when a client says, well, your sensor, you should be able to tell us where the failures are. That's like a dinner party trick. It's of no benefit to anybody. The way that when you've got data coming in live, it's coming in at a certain speed over a certain period of time, and it's been parsed, and the algorithms are being applied to it, and cases are coming up, and you're interacting. If we take historical data, we push it through in a very different manner. We could actually just get one of the teams to go through and label and say, look at that, here are the failures. It's of little benefit as a test. It's a great benefit as a way of teaching the algorithms. I hope that answered the question to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And where we're getting into specifics on our Senseye platform, because this should be about predictive maintenance, I'm very happy to pick that up further if I haven't answered it separately.
Yeah, no, Thomas has said thank you, and that does cover it. So, and thank you again, Thomas, for your question. That was really good. And that doesn't matter if we veer off in this direction, because the title of this, Truth About Predictive Maintenance, sort of opens it up to, it could go into any direction, really. So I might as well throw my list of questions in the bin. Yeah. It almost seems, but in a good way, not in a bad way. So, but what I did want to ask, which is on my list, actually, and we've sort of touched around it a little bit, but in terms of the maturity of the predictive maintenance market, could you sort of give us a bit of background on that and where you think it sits at the minute?
Yeah, so it's a sort of maturity is an emotive word, isn't it? We used to talk about maturity of maintenance processes. We stopped doing it because there are different approaches for maintenance, and they have the right or wrong fit depending on the circumstance. But also, we don't want to encourage the idea that you move from state A to state B, and that state B is very different. This stuff is augmenting. But that's not what your question meant. Your question is about the maturity in the market, where the market's at in terms of adoption. On a day-to-day basis, we meet a mix of people. There'll either be organisations who have tried a solution and it hasn't worked for a number of reasons, or they're in the process of gathering information and working out what to do next and how to run a first process, and getting told by people like me not to do proof of concepts, or they're much earlier stage than that, and they want to start looking at these things, but they don't know much about it. My measure of the maturity of the market, I have to say, is a bit glib, and it's based on some of the misunderstandings that people still have about what can be achieved. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I hope through some of the answers and some of the conversation so far that I have got across that I believe that predictive maintenance is not about wholesale change in a maintenance process. It's about incremental change, adding value by adding reliable information that then can over time change a maintenance practice. On a daily basis, I'll meet people who think that predictive maintenance can do an awful lot more, and there are organisations who will send out requests for information that would indicate that they think that predictive maintenance can predict the exact nature of a failure in a year from now, that it can tell you what the failure mode is going to be and when it's going to happen. And if you take the existence of that idea as an indication of the maturity of the market, then I'd say it's still fairly immature. And I think that's damage that's been done by early days of marketing by the entire market about what's possible, a sort of attention-grabbing marketing whilst trying to promote the idea. But I think it also ties into culturally where we're at as a race, who've just developed AI and the things that, and the way that newspapers talk about it, etc. We're led to believe that we're all going to lose our jobs in the next 5 years because of AI is going to take over, etc. Elon Musk says some pretty amazing things about AI. I have no doubt that AI will increasingly play a really important role in everything that we do, but in many times it'll be very subtle in the background and change things in a beneficial way that you don't understand has happened. But I think everyone leapt to this kind of idea of creativity. And there was a lot of free thinking about what should be done. I mean, I've been a sales guy for over 30 years, and I've sold all manner of products. And I've never worked in a market before where you go to a meeting and everything you say is benchmarked against someone's fantasy, and you come off second best because you can't do these things that nobody's going to be able to do. But much more importantly, that nobody would want to do. So the slightly frustrating idea that a company like Senseye should be able to predict the nature of a failure and give indication of what should be done to mitigate it, take out all the subjectivity, just print out a ticket for a maintenance person to react to and do it months and years ahead, is incorrect and a bit naive and utterly pointless. If you had this is a horrible analogy, but it's a good analogy. I live in a village. In the village, we've just recently had a new doctor. I want to know that doctor, when I see him, is going to generally give me good advice on my health. I don't want him to tell me that I'm going to die from a heart attack in 2 years and 3 months on a Thursday afternoon. I have no interest in him being able to predict that. I want him to, on average, increase the livelihood of all the men who live in my village. And women, of course, but just people like me. And to do that by being good and understanding early signs of change and giving me enough awareness that I can change my diet or do a bit more exercise or whatever it might be. Now, I'm not suggesting that analogy maps exactly into the world of maintenance, but the expectations in the market are like that. That the expectation would be that this marvellous doctor is going to come along and he's going to tell us all when we're going to die. Just not useful information. We shouldn't obsess about the end result. We should obsess about really good maintenance practices that change things now based on the state of things now, because we have a system that gives us some insight to what may happen. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some really good opportunities in organisations we work with where we have relatively quick cycle events that happen and we predict them, and then they can work out at what point in the next few days they need to do something. There's a time and a place for that, and we can do it. But actually, the majority of things, you don't need that level of input, of insight. I'm seeing, that's changing. It was, when I first joined 4 years ago, it was much worse. It's getting better. But if that's a measure of maturity, I say we've got some way to go. Some re-education of organisations. And when we start our cycles, when we start talking to companies, we try and cover a lot of this to reset expectations, because the worst thing that can happen is you get 6 months into a project with a paying client and you feel that you have equity and that the whole thing is mutual, and then they come with a series of questions about things which were really never in plan. That's another reason why it's so important for a company to set out what they want to achieve and to associate value with those things, and to work with a client, with a vendor like us to do it. So there are no surprises. So you can agree as a virtual team what needs to be achieved, and that it's in the realms of a mature reality. Is that a fair answer to the question?
That is a fair answer, definitely. I was going to say, so it's almost like a comparison between, or maybe the misconception is that it's it can do that exactly. So it's like a silver bullet, it can just do it exactly, rather than those making the things day to day easier. I guess what I'm saying is it's not a button you press it just does, like, saves this, saves that, saves that. It sort of increments, like every day it will provide some sort of value, because it's giving you. Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say. If you understand what I'm trying to say with that, I think.
Well, I do, and in fact, the point is, you don't want it to be correctly. You don't want your system to be correctly predicting failures. You want it to be correctly predicting the need for maintenance. It's called predictive maintenance, right? You want it to be predicting that this is a good time to intervene. And if you intervene in good time, then who cares what the ensuing outcome is going to be? You don't need to describe it. And in addition to that, the point is, it's not about the assets which are going to fail and the assets where you correctly or incorrectly define the negative outcome. It's much more about the 98% or 95%, 90%, depending on how good your environment is, of assets where nothing's happening. Because we, as this collective maintenance team, want to be really precise and correct in our maintenance, and we don't want to be going out because it says we have to in our plan, and opening up machines and doing things to them and touching them and whatever, when we don't need to. Because the less we can do that, and the longer we can leave assets without having to affect them, the better. And there's all sorts of wins that come from that. So predictive maintenance in a mature deployment is not about fantastic prediction of failure. It's about really good reduction of intervention, reduction of doing things, better control over your maintenance process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so I've got another question I was about to ask one of mine, but I think one of the audience's questions would be better. So again, Thomas has asked, if possible, could you give some examples of objective indicators that would help to determine how successful the PDM solution is?
Yeah. In the first year of a project, you need to have things that you can measure, and you need to agree what is measured, and you need to associate value with that. So you can have some kind of accumulation or consolidation of those values, so you can see if you've had a return on investment. And we work with organisations to do that. So if you have an environment or a line or production line, for example, where you've got a number of assets which are on, the first thing we'll do is work with an organisation to work out what is the cost of downtime. Now, of course, you can have a very complex model that looks at the cost of downtime, or you can have a very simple one. So we err for the simple, and we err on the side of caution. So we're not trying to bring everything in. What happens if the line goes down and you don't get a product out and you lose credibility? Park that. It needs to be about defining the cost of downtime for half an hour of a given line. And if you can do that, and you can agree on that through the people who need to agree on that in your organisation, then ongoing, when we have cases that are raised, at the end of a case having been raised, there's a process that the maintenance team should go in and close the case, and they should notify whether or not it has avoided. Subjectively, they believe that it has avoided a potential failure further down the line, and how much time that failure would have taken to fix. And by doing that, you can start to build up over a period of time an amount of avoided downtime, and you can have an associated ROI with it. Now, clearly, there are all sorts of other things that happen in the deployment. In year 2, so I'll give you an example of a client, I won't say who they are, but one of our clients, we were measuring things in that manner. But year 2, they came back and they showed us their figures, and they'd achieved 0.5% more uptime. Now, that small, 0.5%, obviously, you need to understand the context of who they are to associate a value with that. But it was enough value that they had a manifold return on investment. And of course, there may be a number of factors. There may be some noise in there, other things that contributed to it. But withholding the ability to control those other aspects, that was associated with this implementation. So short term, you need a metric like downtime to figure it against. There might be other things that you measure it against. So you might measure it in first year against numbers or things coming off the end of a production line. I'm making some assumptions here about industries. And then second year on looking back at some actual changes to the overall production process and output. But on if we get together either when I'm talking to you one-to-one on your specifics, we can look at some other metrics that might work. But we actually have something called ROI lock. This is not an opportunity to sell, but I mentioned it anyway because it's important. Because of this very topic and the lack of maturity in the market and the fact that people still have to justify very heavily the spend on this new technology, we have a process whereby if you do not achieve a return on investment by the end of the first year, you can have or any year actually, you paid a license fee, you can have the money back. I don't like saying that as a sales guy. But the reason we can do that, and it's underpinned by an insurance organisation, is that we know that if you use the product properly and you complete those forms and you have an established idea of the cost of downtime, then you can measure it. And that's a kind of legal process that underpins that measurement. So yeah, it seems to be a respected methodology.
Yeah, hope that answers your question, Thomas. Again, thank you. Another really great question there. So it's flown by incredibly quick, and I've only asked about 2 of my questions. Okay, that's great, Thomas said. So so we come towards the end, which is a bit sad because I've got so much more to ask you, but I think I have to invite you back if that's okay at a later stage. But I guess just before we finish, I think it'd be useful just if you've got any closing thoughts, just to summarise, or any key things you'd like just to reiterate.
Yeah, I think for me, I think the most important things at a high level is that there is no magic. There's no magic. These products, if they seem to be suggesting they're going to tell you things, these sort of magical things, then they're not. They're not big data issues, so it's not a question of taking lots of data and putting it into an AI mill and then getting some wonderful observations out. It's small data, it's much more specific, it needs domain expertise, it needs a good project team. If you work with a company like Senseye, do not stand at the sidelines and watch us tirelessly building something over here and then say yay or nay to it. Be involved. You have to be involved for a project to work. You need to really understand what the project's trying to achieve. You need to be involved. You need the maintenance team involved. And you need time. And you need, this is another point I didn't mention, I'm going to say it as my closing point, you need to spend money on it as well. There is nothing that breeds apathy around a project more than the client not spending money on it. If we can only show them this you should always be a mutual joint venture between a vendor and a client where you're building something that's going to work. There needs to be a commercial underpinning to that. Otherwise, you get to the end of 6 months, a year, and you can't scale because nobody in the business has got budget and wants to pay for it. There needs to be a sense of time and commitment from the vendor. That's their input, and money and people and input from the client side. I think that'd be my closing points.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you all for listening. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you on this stuff. Yeah.
No, it's been an absolutely fantastic discussion, and definitely we'll be inviting you back. And thank you for everyone who's joined us today live and who's listening to the recording as well. So thanks again to Nat, and thanks to Nat, of course. You've forgotten that as well, but thank you, everyone, and we'll be back again very soon. Thank you very much.
To be notified of our next live episode, click the link in the description. And to find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance, go to Siemens.com.